Hey, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, no matter where you're at. Thank you for clicking on this video today. My name is Matthew Bonnick, and this is another episode of the Construct Hub Highlights. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about a construct that I use on a daily basis. It's called CDK IAM Floyd. And if you're a good observer of the definition of a construct, you'll see that this is actually not even a construct in the traditional sense, but it is a very useful library that you can use to help you build IAM policy statements. And it's a great way of keeping from having runtime issues because you maybe mistyped a policy, action, or name.
Gonna have a bad time.
So let's dig into it and take a look at what we got. Starting off, as we always do, we're going to take a look at the Construct Hub page for the library. In this case, very simple. It goes into IAM Floyd, and this is a great example. Has a video at the very beginning that shows how to use the construct. Lots of details in here. Now, this is a construct that has a lot of compatibility concerns when it comes to what version of the CDK you use it with. So at the very beginning, there is this compatibility matrix. Make sure you check this out and you adhere to it. Otherwise, you're going to have a little bit of a bad time. This video is going to show you all of the things that you need. But in short, what this does is it allows you to create IAM policy statements that are correct and right from day one by using a chainable function. So if you've never used chainable functions before, the idea is that you start off and you create an object. In this case, the object is named for whatever service you're trying to access. And then you keep calling additional functions or methods on that object to continue to build your IAM policy. So let's dive in real quick and take a look, and I'll show you how to use it. To use the CDK IAM Floyd library, we're going to always start with creating policy statements, and these policy statements always begin with creating an object that is related to that service you're interacting with. So in this case, I'm going to create this managed policy, and I'm going to give this managed policy access to doing some things in EC2. So I'll start by creating an EC2 object from the CDK IAM Floyd library. And then at this point, I can chain additional function calls on this to build up the policy. So those functions that I call are generally going to fall into one of a couple of categories. The first is going to be my basic allow or deny. And then at this point, you're going to call some additional functions on it. And you're going to keep calling these over and over until you've built the policy that you want. And these functions that you call are generally going to fall into a couple of categories. The first type of function you're going to call is going to be two functions, and these two functions correspond and create the actions on the policy. So I may go in here and say to start instances, meaning that I want to create the EC2 start instances action in this policy. And likewise, I could also say to stop instances, and that would additionally add in, and I'm building up along the way, these additional actions so I can stop instances as well now. And I can just keep chaining these together as much as I want to build up whatever I need to build. I can, thankfully, because this is all strongly typed, my editor here is telling me exactly which functions I can call, and I don't have to worry about mistyping in an action name or anything because it's all nicely strongly typed. So I can continue to add these things in. Maybe I want to describe security groups as well. Could be a useful action to have. Now, once I have the actions taken care of, typically the next step is what resources you want to be able to perform these actions on. Now, I'm going to go ahead and reformat this a little bit, kind of just helps a little bit with the readability of this. So I always typically start off with the object on a line along with the allow, and then the two functions come next to build up those actions on the policy statement. And then next, I'm going to say what resources I can perform these actions on. So those are on functions. So if I start typing on, you can see all of these functions that are available that help me define the resources that I can now perform these actions on. So if I wanted to say on a specific instance, I can use the onInstance method, and again, strongly typed, so it's telling me right away, I need to give it at least an instance ID, so I could just pass in a value, or in this case, just give it a static string value. I could additionally put in an account, a region, a partition, and those things. If I don't, it'll get those from the stack that I'm working with and assume those from the stack that I'm currently working with. Actually, I don't know if that'll do it. Let's take a look and see. So if the account of the resource defaults to an empty string or all accounts, so I was wrong.
Wrong. Wrong.
So actually, great thing here, I can just immediately dive into the documentation and see how this thing works. If I don't supply those other values, it's going to put in stars. So any account, if this instance is in any account whatsoever, I can do that. That's not probably so great. So I'm going to go ahead and do a stack of this. Actually, because I'm in a stack, I can just say this.account. And just leave it there for my account ID. Additionally, now I need a region, so I can say this.region. And finally, this dot partition if I want to, and fill these things out and get them explicitly tied to the same account, same region as the stack is being deployed to. And of course, I could provide other values if I wanted to give access into other accounts or things like that. So just like with the two functions, I can continue just to call in additional on functions here to specify, okay, what security group rules that I want to perform things on. And again, it strongly types and helps me along the way with my editor, show me exactly what I want. Finally, the last type of function that you're going to probably call, and maybe not even that often, but it is there, is for conditionals. And those fall into the if functions. So any of the conditionals you want to add to this policy, you can use the if functions to get there. And like everything else, we really get to see some nice strong typing in here. So I can say if the public address of whatever this request is coming from is some sort of 192.1.8.0.1, then this is now that conditional that gets rendered out. So let's take a quick look and see what is actually going to, what this is going to actually render into and what you're going to get out of it. So I've got a snapshot test in here. This is probably the easiest way to do it, or you could just do a synthesize and take a look at the resulting stack. But I'm just going to go ahead and run this test real quick and see what it produces. And let's go ahead and update the snapshot real quick. So it's taking whatever I've got now as the truth. And then I can use my handy icon here to take a look. And I can see, in this case, I've created a policy in here. And it has a description, it has a path. And then the policy document in here has these additional statements. So I can see that I've got my EC2 describe security groups. I've got my start instances, my stop instances. Didn't have to worry about typing those wrong. Strongly typed me, got me the right values right away.
You keep using the word. I don't think it means what you think it means.
I can see that my conditional was added in here, and finally I can see that these resources were added in as well. So really convenient and great way of building up IAM policies, because we're not always going to have the option to use grant functions within the CDK to build out additional IAM policies. Sometimes we just have to build them ourselves. And this is a really great library to get it done and get it done right the first time. Now, one thing additionally I want to mention here is that while you can build all of your policy statements all you want all day long using this sort of method, there is something that you may want to take advantage of, which is that right now, as I build up these policy statements, I'm not really building a semantic meaning. I'm really just building these policy statements and saying I can start instances, stop instances, describe security groups, but it's not real reusable, and it doesn't really semantically tell me what is going on. I can't just look at this and go, oh, this manage policy is for managing this particular type of instance within my environment or whatever. If we were to take a look at something like ECR policy, so ECR requires a pretty broad set of permissions if you want to push a container into an ECR repository. I can go ahead and just over here grab a example of the policy that would be needed. So let's say I wanted to build out that policy for pushing images. I could use an ECR object in here. And then because I have it saved left over from somewhere else, I'm just going to copy and paste all this in. And you can see if I want to push an image into ECR, I got to define all of these individual permissions and actions and then grant that to something. And it's doable. And again, because of IAM Floyd, we get a really nice type safety, but we don't get any semantic meaning in this case. So one thing that I'll often do is go in and sort of create my own version of these classes or subclass the libraries and the classes out of CDK IAM Floyd into my own classes that do provide me that semantic meaning. So what do I mean by that? So I'm going to start by creating a new subclass of this ECR object, and I'm going to call it my ECR. And all I have to do is extend out the ECR object that's given to us by IAM Floyd. And the constructor is a basic constructor, doesn't really do anything too fancy. And then I'm going to create a new function call on here that is called toPushImage, meaning that these are the permissions needed to push an image into an ECR repository. And then all I have to do is return back this object and then all of those actions that I mentioned before. And this is going to continue with that pattern of a chainable function call. But now when I go and I want to create this sort of policy and use this policy somewhere in the rest of my code, rather than creating this object here that has all of these permissions and having to retype this potentially over and over, I can now say I want to use my ECR object. And instead of finding all of these things, I just say toPushImage. And that's it. Now I've got a policy that I can come in here and let's say I added it over to this manage policy here. And if I go back and I rerun my test, what we should see in here is now an additional policy statement added to this object that has in all of those additional actions. And what I see when I take a look at the code that I wrote is I have this my ECR object and it's just toPushImage. I have semantically wrapped up all of those individual actions into one quote unquote chainable action here that gives me more context, more meaning, more semantics there that is makes this easier to read and easier to understand what's going on. All right, so that's it. Like I said, not really a construct in terms of our typical definition, but something that is very useful. I use this in almost every one of my projects now. As soon as I get to the point where I have to start writing a IAM policy, a statement, anything, and I can't use my grant functions, I'm immediately just installing this library and using it to build these things out because I know I'm going to get a more correct result by using them. And those things that are having to wrap up common policies together, I just build out into these separate objects and we publish them internally for some of our common reuse cases. So I hope that was useful. I hope you learned something from it. If you liked this video, please give me a thumbs up. It really does help me understand if you're actually liking these videos and if they're providing value. If you want to see more of them going forward in the future, you can hit that subscribe button. Helps with the algorithm. And again, helps me understand if you actually want to see this content. But as always, thank you for joining in today. I hope you liked this video, and I'll see you next time.